Hello, everybody. It is Wednesday. We're getting a little bit of feedback. Is that you, Tim?
Nope, I didn't hear mine.
Is that me? Okay, we're going good now then. All right. I am Jared Kabika Miller, debate coach, professor of communications. This is Tim Seavey from Visolutions, San Diego State University.
How's it going?
We are DebateSensei, and we're going to be talking about some IPDA topics today. Matt is out trying to start up his own ballroom dance company right now. He's trying to get some angel investors on that one.
I wish him well.
Yeah. Okay. So, hey, we like talking about the IPDA topics every once in a while because they switch up so much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you know, it's you kind of have to really deal with a bunch of them in over long periods of time to see the sequence or the patterns that form between all of them. So I always like coming back to these ones. So what we're going to do for everyone is actually I went to the Griffin Invitational and I picked out the semifinal round from that tournament. We replaced one of the topics because Tim really wanted to talk about it. So, but still, 4 out of 5 of them were straight picked from a tournament, very, very recent. And we're just going to kind of go through them and do a little striking, do a little discussing. We would love it if people jump in and ask questions or say what they would do in situations like this as well. But let's go over the topics really quick, and then we'll kind of do a mock striking sort of thing. All right.
Yeah.
First one. Voting should be compulsory within the United States. I love this one, especially, around the election times. Everyone talks about that. This one is a sleeper, I think. I think it's dynamic. Liberal arts colleges are doomed. Lot to unpack for that one. Number 3, United States should significantly restrict microtransactions within video games. I like that topic. Okay. And then we got mass civil disobedience regarding climate change is morally justified. And last but not least, by request, golf courses do more harm than good. And that's a clever one. I do like that. I like all of these ones, but I'll be honest with you. As I was looking over all of them, I'm like, man, I'd kind of like to be affirmative on all of them. You know what I mean? It's like I don't know.
All right. Well, you go first then. So we'll assume. So yeah, I'll be neg. So I'll go and strike, and let's see what we get to. If you were affirmative and I were negative, what we would get down to. Okay.
So yeah, go for it. Which one are you striking first?
My first strike would be, and also I think we should probably say like why we're striking, because again, like the strategy of the strike process is useful. So I would strike mass civil disobedience regarding climate change is morally justified. Number 4, because I feel like that one's fairly lopsided. I don't think you're going to get a whole, I'm sure you could come up with some interesting stuff, but I don't think that you'd have nearly as strong of a story to tell against civil disobedience. 1, because people love to assemble, and also for climate change. That's going to be a tough one, I think, to argue on the neg.
Okay, so on the affirmative, I think I'd strike the liberal colleges. I don't really know how I would formulate an affirmative on that one. And it just, I don't know, it feels like the debate would be so squishy all throughout the entire thing. You know what I mean? It's it's really hard to put definitions on that, So that's
I actually judged that semifinal round, and they picked that topic, and it was a little bit squishy. I think the debaters actually did a very good job. But it generally came down to the definition of doomed. And if that means that it's indefinite, if that means that it's just possible, if that means that they're already dead, and that was a little bit weird. So it was just a lot of interesting learning about liberal arts colleges and how badly they're doing out there. But it just became kind of mushy around what doomed means.
Mm-hmm. All right. What's your next strike?
My next strike would be, I believe it was, as much as it would be a cool debate, I'm going to go with the microtransactions. The USFG should restrict use of microtransactions, because I think that one's also cool, but being totally honest, I don't know enough about it. So if I were an IPDA debater, I just don't have enough facts on either side, and I don't know if I'd be able to research enough to really get that whole topic. So I'd be totally cool if we debated that, but I think the others are still better.
Okay, so then I would strike the golf courses one.
All right.
That's not necessarily about the golf courses as much as like I think I got some good stuff on the compulsory voting. Like
Sure.
I really think on the affirmative I could come up with some pretty good stuff.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And it's somewhat predictable because it's a debate I've done. You know what I mean? So it's not really about whether or not, you know, like, oh my God, I love golf courses. You know, I don't want to speak out against them. It's kind of like I got more stuff on the other one. So that's where it comes down to it.
It's definitely a deeper debate. And I think so that's where I think the second neg strike is underestimated, because if you know that there's still like, so you got 3 topics at that point when you're on the neg. If you see one that's like you really don't want to debate, and then another one that you're like, kind of against it, and one that the AF is definitely going for, you might want to leave the one that's like complete garbage, just predicting what the other side is going to strike. So it may actually be in your best interest to leave one that you know neither of you particularly want to debate. Like sometimes that just creates for a bad debate, but I think that strategically it may be worth kind of trying to corner the AF into something that you want them to do.
Okay. So this is really quick. Let's flip it. Let's see if we come up with the same thing on the other side, and then we'll go through each one and kind of like do AF and neg strats, huh?
Cool.
The first one is, so I'm on neg. I think I might do. Ooh, man! Now I'm second guessing myself. Striking on neg, I might do. You know what? I think I would strike the compulsory voting first. And
really? Because you think that rough on the neg?
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, like, because when I kind of run through the debate in my mind, I'm kind of like, I don't like where I'm ending up in that one. You know what I mean? Especially against somebody who knows what they're doing.
Okay. All right, I'd strike the liberal arts college for that same reason. Like it's an interesting topic to learn about, but I think it's tough to really nail down like these are the 4 reasons why and the 4 reasons why not.
Okay, then I think I'd strike the microtransactions and leave it up to you on those last 2.
It's coming down to, well, I got to strike the civil disobedience since we got golf courses.
Oh, golf courses on the last one. Okay, so neg on golf courses. All right. I think I could. All right. Okay. So why don't we do these first 2 ones, right? You know, I mean, we started with. So the number 1 topic was voting is compulsory. If I was on the affirmative. Okay. So here's the thing. I think one of the reasons I like the compulsory voting one on the AF. All right. And so let me just give a breakdown of what I would do, and then give me a breakdown about what you would do, and if you could respond to anything, then that'd be cool. But we're just, just a little bit back and forth. So on voting, I think the plan text is really where you kind of like the entire round takes a certain tone. Okay.
So I need to be prepping 3 T's.
Yeah. So on the plan text, I'd say that. Yeah, because I know all the extra topicality stuff that might come out about it, but like I think I could engage on that one. Where voting is compulsory, I'd say, all right. So first, that voting day would have to be a national holiday, because if it's required, then that means you have to you should be allowed time off work to do it. Otherwise, it's too hard to meet the requirement, right?
Yeah.
Secondly, any penalties for not voting are the same for like ditching jury duty. I'm not sure what those are, but I'd look them up probably during my prep time. But regardless, I'm just like, that's the same sort of penalty. However they enforce jury duty is they're going to enforce voting. And thirdly, all ballots must include a none of the above option.
Okay.
So those are things that like, that's my like go-to example when I'm teaching students about how important plan texts are, because when they see voting should be compulsory, they don't think about those little details and how they could really change the direction of the round. And then I'd make a big old analogy between jury duty and voting. Like both of these are civil service requirements of people.
Sure.
People bitch about jury duty, but they don't say that it's like tyranny. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we have so much time of jury duty being compulsory that we we know that that's not, a lead up into a tyrannical government or anything like that. So
yeah, I think honestly, if I were on the negative, I would grant the national holiday. Like if I were listening to that, I would grant the jury duty. I think that makes sense. That may be a good area to like push more, because like, compulsory means you have to, and jury duty, you technically like there's all these exclusions and things, and that's not fair to offer. But I think that would get too messy, because honestly, I just don't know enough about the penalties for jury duty. Yeah. I think I would definitely have to push an extra T on the whole none of the above, because now you're giving an extra option. Like that's taking neg ground, because my whole contention would be that choosing not to vote is in itself an act, like choosing not to participate in the farce of the democratic system that we have. So I would just probably go off the deep end on like why our democracy is a complete sham and a shell and a lie, and it's just like, giving us some kind of little bit of bait so that we don't like rise up and tear the entire system down that is so structured to keep us down, right? So that would be probably the majority of my contention. I'd go like deep democracy only. So I'd probably go like counterplan, every single person votes on every single like piece of legislation ever in every state, in every county, and every federal, like just all the way in, and say like that's the only way the democracy works if that's what you actually value. So I'd probably go like that far in and make that like attach a T to like you can't take my ground of extra options. But I think my bigger like another disadvantage that I would throw on there of the compulsory side of it though would be that name recognition is a nasty, nasty beast. Like the majority of, I would probably find the stats on what like campaign strategists weight on name recognition. Because you see like billboards and signs and radio ads and all that kind of stuff, and they're not really talking ever about the policy. They're not talking about why the other candidates are bad. They're generally just getting the candidate's name out there so many times that when voters that do reluctantly, show up at the polls or like figure the thing out and just bubble it in and don't put thought into it, like, oh, I've heard that name a million times, and then they stick with it. And I would contend that that is like the manifestation of the worst of our democratic system, that your plan just supercharges it. That's probably where I would have to go, because like now everyone is forced to do it, and so it's just going to be a race to the bottom.
So my follow-up strategy, my rebuttal strategy is just blanket non-uniques to all this stuff. You're like, name recognition is bad. It's kind of like, yeah, that's kind of the problem now. Like, this doesn't really make it more of a problem. All it does is, like, if anything, people that don't have name recognition are now forced to vote. And, like, now it kind of takes that out of it, and I don't know. But a lot of people make the arguments about, oh, we don't, if you force people to vote, then you're going to have people that, don't know anything and going and voting. I'm kind of like, yeah, that's kind of
that's super non-unique.
Yeah. Like, yeah. Like, you got to work on the uniqueness on that one. Holy moly.
You know how many hundreds of thousands of votes a year Mickey Mouse gets?
Yeah. I mean, it's just, and so the non-unique response, that's also a really, so the plan text and the non-unique, that's just really textbook great sort of stuff for that. All right, hey, let's jump down to the golf courses, and then we'll kind of backfill with the other ones that we didn't choose, all right? So cool. Golf courses, you're on the F for that one.
Yeah. So I would probably go the route of like green spaces are already so limited, and like humans don't get enough access to green spaces. Golf courses tend to be some of the only access to it. Like these are surface level things to throw out there that I don't think are like really deep, meaty reasons like why they're good for the fabric of society. But I think I would throw out there something about just like having green spaces, having like open territory just for like the ability of things to live there. Now, granted, you've got like so much disadvantage on like the water impacts and like the clear cutting of whatever used to be there and all that kind of stuff. So I know there's this like huge environmental weight on the other side. So I probably am best to stay away from like the super nature route, because they only really benefit humans for the most part, right? So I think I'd have to go the route of like business is done on the golf course. I think it would certainly come down to the judge that you get of like deals are made on the golf course. And like that is the, de facto way that things, that meetings move through and that meetings happen. And like, it is the one de-stressor for politicians, right? Besides tremendously illegal activities and things. So I think I'd throw in, I don't have a lot of super crafty arguments for it, but I just want to see where debaters would take that one. Because I don't think there's a ton of overlap between debate and golf. And I was just, it hit me a couple days ago.
Yeah. See, so if I'm doing the neg, I mean, I'd be going pretty hard as an overall strategy about how um, it's just as it's just as bad as any other use of land that we might have. A skyscraper also has all those things. Houses also have those things. There's nothing unique about what you just said to golf courses that you can't also apply to other buildings. Furthermore, they are kind of green spaces. Like, there are a lot of animals, and like, we do this all the time. But like, so I'd say that all the disadvantages that you're bringing out are symbolic, and I would say that symbolic badness doesn't really, you can't measure that. All right, and like, okay, so some people think it's symbolically bad and some people think it's symbolically good, to each their own, but you can't measure it. There's no, like, so at the point in which you don't go for the water argument, I'm kind of like, all right, now I'm winning. All right, you know, because you're saying if it's like green space stuff, you know what I mean? Like, then everything we do, I realize, like, so being human is everything. All right, and so you're just like, yeah. I don't know.
I fouled that one up. I thought that I actually had that resolution switched.
Oh,
I was arguing for golf courses there. Those were my best long arguments for golf courses. Were like, green spaces, good for business, like generally gives open territory, right. that kind of thing. All right, so on the other side, I think the negative strategy is actually very straightforward, right? Is like, sure, totally.
Elite cost to play and access. All right, now Jay, and that's also part of the symbolism too. Now, I'm from Long Beach, okay? And Long Beach has public golf courses, a lot of them. I mean, this is where Tiger Woods grew up. The reason that he was able to go and play for 8 hours a day when he was 12 years old is because of, you know, like, we go to Hartwell and it's like $12 to play. You know what I mean? It's like everybody's playing there. And so you can get into like golf courses, everything that people hate about golf courses rely a lot on the symbolism of them. If you go to country clubs, you're absolutely right. And a lot of golf courses are country clubs, right? Like, a lot of them are. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, so I
appreciate, like, I appreciate the slight concession, but it was like, the elitism stuff needs to be brought up. You can't you can't ignore that. I don't think, you know what I mean? If you're on the affirmative.
I think I'd go just all in on water. So, and you can even talk about like the eutrophication of lakes is like one of the biggest issues with fresh water or bodies of water in the United States. Is like, we only have so much fresh water. Like the whole Keep Tahoe Blue thing. I think I would like slap one of those stickers on my water bottle in the round and just like plop that on my desk. Just to, like, have a little ego. So like, by the way, you can't see into Tahoe anymore because it's all green with algae because they're fertilizing the damn Edgewood golf course. So no, golf courses are the worst because like they come to be expected and they're a sign of like a place, you know, prospering, and yet they are like the most destructive thing. So I was actually going on the AF earlier on the neg. I think you just go all in on the environment.
Man, you can't believe how often that happens though. Especially when I'm teaching people, you know, like, oh my God, Katie, are you? Oh my God, that's a clever one. Golf course. We didn't specify. We didn't specify because disc golf doesn't clear cut anything. They just post up. Oh,
that's true. There's no grass even required. You just go through forest. Well played. Well played.
All right. Well, but here's the thing, Katie. If golf courses do more harm than good, that's more of a neg argument, right? You know what I mean? Like, the disc golf course would be more of a neg argument, and so you wouldn't want to do that, in my opinion. You wouldn't want as disc golf on the affirmative, and then forcing them to define it that way on the negative seems backwards.
So I think Katie and I were thinking the same thing. We were thinking that golf courses do more good than harm, but that's just not the way the resolutions are phrased, which is a silly way to phrase resolutions. Realistically, like when tournament directors are coming up with this stuff, that like is just a little 8-inch speed bump for every novice out there to just like tumble right over, and myself right here, as I just think.
Oh my God, I can't tell you how many times I'm teaching somebody and they just get their side backwards. They just get it backwards. Like, and so that's become like the low bar that everyone needs to clear in order to pass the course is, do you know what side you're on? You know what arguments are relevant? It's like, seriously, and that's like, if you know and you can make those arguments, you get a C. All right. Like
Hey, let's get degrees. Here we go.
Yeah, that's about it. That's about it. So yeah, I mean, like the water argument, I think is, yeah, I would go for that on the affirmative. I would absolutely go
100%
for that.
water, I think all into like fertilization
Yeah.
and also like the clear cutting of other natural resources. So it's like, no, it's not a green space. It's a manufactured, fabricated, anthropocentric green space that like kills everything.
Yeah. And I mean, on the neg, I have to go hard for like reclaimed water, like, like municipal golf courses. Like, I haven't seen one that doesn't use reclaimed water in order to do that. So that would be wasted anyway. And you're using it to, and then maybe I could go for like heat islands that at the very least, at least they cool areas that would normally be paved over, you know what I mean? And so, I don't know, but honestly, I could think of the arguments coming back to that on the other side is like normally golf courses aren't in the inner city. They're on the outskirts anyway. That's not where the heat islands are.
And they have giant like parking lots because that's just another nature of what they have to do.
Yeah.
All right. So what about some of those other topics then?
Yeah.
So if we were to have gone another route, which we very easily could have.
Let's see. Liberal arts. What would you do on the AF? Liberal arts colleges are doomed.
So there's just a ton of stats of like how badly they're tanking. And so I think what you do is you just take, so our last conversation on logical fallacies, I think you take the like argument to ignorance and just really run with it. So it's that like, because of COVID, things are unclear. We're not certain what's happening next. All that we can do is our best projection. So our doom is we're like having a fact debate here of a discussion of what something will happen. And based on data point, the next logical data point is crumbling. So there's a whole bunch of stats of like how fast they're disappearing and how many are going out of business, how many are merging. And that actually ended up becoming like the little handhold that the negative side hung on to was like, but they're not doomed. They're just merging. So a ton of liberal arts schools are consolidating into bigger schools so that like they don't completely evaporate. And so it became this like kind of a little bit messy debate of like, does that mean that they're dead or does that mean that they're just like offered in different ways or whatever? So it was tricky, but I think on the affirmative, I would still go with just like, you got to, connect the dots. Here's every piece of data up to this point. It leads to this termination.
Yeah, I mean, it starts making me think that I don't know much about the history of liberal arts colleges now. You know what I mean? That like I don't know if I looked into the history about when did they become most popular? When was the first one? How is it different than like universities?
So you got to push. I think that's where the definition debate can really come in your favor. Is you can say traditionally they're non-STEM focused institutions. So liberal arts, you're looking at history and philosophy and English and communication and these other soft sciences at best, but generally non-sciences. You're getting BAs. It's Bachelor of Arts in whatever. And because of the global, but particularly just national pivot to STEM being a focus and research institutions, and like that's where money comes and that's where grants come. And there's just so much more, you could say, directly translated value out of STEM related programs at universities that there's just not as much money to support. And I think you also get you get the entire territory of like why universities at large are predatory and terrible and capitalist, like just, red in tooth and nail beasts of the market and not at all like learning institutions, $60,000 whatever tuitions and like making 17, 18-year-olds forced into $250,000 financial obligations. Like, I think you get to really go hard on that. But instead of pinning it on all universities, you just really foot the blame on liberal arts colleges. Be like, well, if they got an engineering degree, it would actually be worth it. But instead, calm, and here we are, ha 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 ha, and just make all the calm jokes because usually that's who's at debate tournaments anyways.
Yeah, I guess this is one of those ones where I would have to look into a little bit more research because my first instinct is to see if there was ever another trend in the past where liberal arts colleges took a hit and they recovered from it. You know what I mean?
Fair,
and then you kind of go, hey, it's like maybe this is just a trend rather than like some sort of future or something like that. And
I'm sure around the Depression they probably suffered again too, because like a lot of them have been around a super long time. But they, like any other school, they probably bounce back. So that's a good strategy, I think.
Yeah, I mean, in debate tournaments, I debated people from strictly liberal arts colleges sometimes, and they were just brilliant people. They were just absolutely brilliant individuals. And so there's still a lot of people that get that feed from liberal arts colleges into like law school. You know what I mean? And like, I mean, like, I don't know.
I'm sure into medical school and like various like STEM programs as well.
Yeah.
It's just not typically as direct of a path from like a philosophy degree into chemical engineering or something, which is again, I think you can make like there'd be some good front lines against like why STEM and kill everything else is a bad direction. Like that's not producing a well-rounded world or something.
Private versus public. I think that's absolutely true. Like I can't think of a single public liberal arts college. I hope people just like, trounce me on that right now and just, like name them. But yeah, I think that you could make the private public argument pretty well because every college I'm thinking of that is a liberal arts college is private.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really struggling to come up with an example of one that is just a public liberal arts college. Yeah, I think that's a very good.
I'm not sure on that. That's a good point.
Yeah, I
was going to say anything else you want to finish on that one. Otherwise, we can hit up microtransactions.
Yeah, here we go. Take a look at this. Only a few Ivy League colleges have funding. Yeah, I know they have these giant endowments, just ridiculous. Like it's ridiculous. Endowments. Yeah. Like I think I heard that Harvard has like $4 billion of an.
They're always, at least last I read, they were neck and neck with the Vatican.
Yeah, I mean, what? Yeah. All right, let's. We got a few minutes left. Let's talk about a few of these here. All right, so the microtransactions.
So on the affirmative, I think you go with the argument of like kids. I mean, there's a couple good horror stories you can read out there of like kids spending thousands of dollars on their parents' credit cards because the game doesn't do a very good job of telling you that you're spending real dollars. It's like a very soft interface between I'm in a game and I walk into a store and I want that new, car or whatever, and I just click buy. And yet real human dollars are being spent into that, like an actual unit of money is being spent on these things. So some kids don't know that, and that gets really out of hand.
Right.
And I'm sure like video game companies can say like, well, it's rated for whatever, and there's these kinds of limitations, and like they should know. But another one I think that was that got a little bit of traction was there was a teenager that posted an open letter to, I want to say it was like Electronic Arts or something, about dealing with addiction with microtransactions of like, the games are absolutely financially incentivized to make everything as like addictive and sucked in as possible to keep that like dopamine, dripping just by doing the next thing. And so they create such a strong, multi-sensory motivation to spend more that it's like, basically teaching our young kids to gamble in like the most aggressive way. But early on, because a lot of it actually is gambling. That's like one of the techniques of like loot boxes and whatever. It's like, oh, you never know what you're going to get kind of a thing. So it really is kind of setting the stage for gambling addiction.
So if we're on the negative, like my first thing is like, how are they going to restrict it? Like, what's it? I think on the negative, like the mantra almost always for me is the devil's in the details. Tell me how you plan on doing it. What's the penalty for having too many microtransactions? What's the limit? Like when do you cut it off? How do you regulate it? Because at that point, it like there's a lot of businesses that if you do it too much, they have legit people. I mean, I played like Clash of Clans, and at one point I'm kind of like, you know what, screw this. I'm going to pay $5. I'm going to make my thing. I don't want to wait 12 hours. You know what I mean? And it's like, and I knew what I was getting into. And so if you set it up into a way, it's kind of like, oh no, we think that you're an 8-year-old trying to do this. I'd get pretty pissed off. And so if you do this wrong, you could really piss off a lot of people. And then I think you're like really getting to like, people's business models. And it's not necessary. It's not necessary to like screw over businesses if you have a poorly constructed policy.
I think that I would argue for that because I think it's a lot harder. So especially when you're taking some of like the biggest games, so microtransactions are the most prevalent, not in indie games, but in like the really, really big ticket games. And I think that it's a lot harder to tell a story of like, boo-hoo, poor Electronic Arts that's making, tens of billions of dollars. So the video game industry, for reference, is like multiples of the film industry and the television industry and the music industry combined. The amount of money that's made on like a game release is absolutely bananas. So I don't think you would have quite as much ground to be like, oh, you're going to hurt the company. I think that it would be like, yeah, that's a predatory policy. And like the government is here to tell people when they're making money in predatory ways. Like, don't sell cigarettes to kids. Don't sell gambling to kids. Like, I would probably just make that narrative, like try and keep that as tight as possible. Like, yep, it is bad for the economy, and let them deal with it. Like, they'll come up with something new.
Yeah. I mean, like, I can appreciate that. I really can. But like, what if I don't know. I guess you start getting into counterplan ground, and so significantly restrict like a minor repair. It's like, no, just I guess a minor repair would just be like you'd have to have some sort of authentication.
Sure. Yeah. Like Facebook is requiring so many things these days that you have to upload a driver's license. Like, have you had to do that yet?
No.
For various functions on Facebook? Yeah. Like straight, like take a photo of a government issued ID and submit it.
You know what? I think we did for our Facebook ads because we talk about debate stuff. So they think that we're trying to be like political ads.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm like, no, we don't really care. Like, I don't ever want to get into politics. I don't ever want to get into politics. You know what I mean? And it's like, and I know that debate is so closely related to it, but I'm trying to keep that barrier between it. And so, they have that authentication. And now I guess the thing would be like the counterplan, you have to define it in a ways like this isn't limiting microtransaction. It's just authenticating it. Like there could be just as many, you know what I mean? It doesn't, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that'd be a really interesting kind of like technical, tedious debate, but I think it could be really good, like especially the longer it's fleshed out.
All right, we're going over time, but people are still watching, and we got one more topic. Screw it, let's go. Here we go. Mass civil disobedience regarding climate change is morally justified. I think the affirmative kind of makes intuitive sense.
I think you got a lot of good arguments on that side. Like a lot.
Morally justified, right? Like climate change is threatening like all of human survival, right?
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people are going to disagree on that point. I think so. The negative strategy is just going to have to be like bringing up examples of where like major disruption to human, because you can't really make it animals, like human well-being came about because of civil disobedience. So like, people, blocking freeways because like protesting cars. It's like that stuff happens sometimes. Like they'll put like logs and stuff across freeways to stop traffic and protest of people driving and like this has to stop kind of thing. And then you can quantify like, accidents or traffic or like, dollars lost by loss of transit or whatever. I think that that's just a really difficult uphill battle to fight.
Okay. Now, when you bring that up though, like again, on the negative, I think that people really should embrace the devil is in the details. It's like, I want you to give me examples of what type of civil disobedience you're talking about. So my first instinct is define civil disobedience.
Sure, because like a peaceful protest is not necessarily, that's not civil disobedience. That's just peaceful assembly. Civil disobedience is you've got to break something. You have to violate some law.
Yeah, you have to break a rule, right? You know what I mean? And so I appreciate the blocking traffic. I think that meets. I definitely think that meets. And now when it comes to blocking traffic for climate change, I'm kind of like, okay, so you're blocking the nurse from getting to the hospital because, you know what I mean, in 50 years, we need to, we need to avert some catastrophe from 50 years from now. I'm like, and now I'm starting to question that. You know what I mean? It's like, at least I can bring up the question. It's like, maybe civil disobedience isn't necessary. Like, this is a long-term problem, and civil disobedience is usually in response to things that are like kind of immediately happening. Right. I know the arguments. I know people like, don't get me wrong. I know climate change is happening now. All right. I know, like, but at the same time, it's kind of like, you're trying to stop something. You're trying to stop the next person from being beaten versus you're trying to stop 50 years of, temperature rising. I think that equivocation, we got to be careful about that.
Sure. Well, I think having a specific policy is probably, or like a unique policy objective is probably while really, really damning in the moment, but like, or frustrating in the moment to say, is still a useful rebuttal to civil disobedience as like a thing. Be like, okay, what specifically is being advocated for? Like, what thing solves the problem that we are demonstrating for? And so that's where like you can point to all kinds of like, oh, well, if it weren't for civil rights, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 would not have been passed. Like there was civil disobedience, there was a policy like A to B, like and you know, tons of other policies that came from it. But there was like a particular politic to it. If there is not a particular politic to whatever green movement, right? You know, environmental civil disobedience, like you're just messing things up to raise awareness. Like I think awareness campaigns, you can throw some good argument against them, like that they don't necessarily help things.
When I think of civil disobedience, I usually think of we're not going to follow this law because this law is wrong. Like
right.
At this counter because that law saying that we can't is wrong.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so blocking traffic isn't like these traffic laws are wrong, so we're not going to follow them. It's just like we were trying to raise awareness, and I'm cool with that. I'm cool, but at the same time, it's kind of like I can't think of a climate law that you would want to disobey in the name of raising awareness. You know what I mean?
Like studying trees is probably, I think, the best one. So studying trees. If you can, this is a big movement thing for a while where activists would pile stakes into trees. And you basically can't really see them, and it doesn't harm the tree too much. Like the tree's still able to grow and do whatever. However, if a logger tries to cut it down, it like completely destroys their saw, and oftentimes like it killed a lot of loggers for a period of time. So they like had to shut down logging operations, and it was a whole big thing. So that's like a really extreme example, but that is fairly specific to like do not cut down trees. We stake your life against the tree's life kind of thing.
Yeah, or squatting in a tree. I forget exactly what it's called. You know what I mean? That might be like that's less violent. If you wanted to avoid that, I think engaging that sort of like violence is good for debate at the very least, because it kind of like I don't know. I think it's strong for you to kind of like take that difficult ground in order to have that discussion. But if you want to say something a little less violent about just staking out your ground in a tree and preventing them from cutting it down. That one, I think, is probably one of the best examples. And so after a little bit, 5 minutes of talking it through, I'm like, I can see that on the affirmative. That is probably one of the best examples I could think of off the top of my head of, or you did, or you know what I mean?
Well, I went the gnarly route, but that's sometimes where prep time can be so tricky. Like you've really got to think through the different scenarios. Like, it took us a little while to figure what's the right way that you support this, that you actually meet the definitions and you have something that's defensible.
Right. I mean, we started with blocking traffic and we ended up in squatting trees. You know what I mean? It's like, I think, it's a good progression. And that's kind of like how prep time works. Sometimes you're like, that's not quite on point. And IPDA, you got 5 minutes. You got 5 minutes to get to the point. You know what I mean? Or to kind of for the first affirmative to really kind of show this is an example of civil disobedience in the name of climate change. And that would be great. You know what I mean? It's like, and so, Okay. Cool. Because if you did the spiking trees argument, I think the negative would have a lot more ground. That's for sure. But still, I still think that would be a good debate. I think you'd be really getting to the heart of the intent of that resolution.
Well, there's also like a lot of historical context and stuff that can be used for that, of like, here are like logging operations that did stop because of this, and like the trade-off of human versus tree life and things like that. So you're absolutely right, that would get messier. But I think that's the role of an IPDA, is you've got to just define like, what do you feel comfortable arguing against? Like, what do you think you can reasonably defend in a round? Like, is it making a big enough impact or not? So good stuff. Well, that was covered a good breadth of topics there.
Yeah, we did. We went a little over, but we're still watching. Hey, thank you all for sticking with us. We'll be back next week talking about whatever. All right. This is Tim Seavey from Visolution, San Diego State. I'm Jared Kubika Miller, your communications professor, debate coach. We'll see you next week. All right, everyone. All right. Bye.
Thanks.